So for those of you that, when you came in the room, I don't know if you saw the little placard there, just a little QR code, but hit that up. From a Dell perspective, we'd love to get your feedback and guidance on the sessions we've done. This is our fourth session, one of the better attended ones, so thank you for coming. You guys all want to find out about some philosophies around backup and recovery. There's a lot of work that's happening around SQL 2022 specifically, and some of the hybrid coolness that's out there, so we'll be covering that broadly. I'm going to actually be walking around the room. Rob is going to be leading with the screen share and the slides and stuff like that, and some of the hands-on experience that we're going to be talking about with specifically around some of the goodness around SQL 2022 and backup. So Rob, if you want to go to the first slide, we'll get started here.
Yeah,
so you're
thank
up.
you. Oh, I'm up. So thanks everyone, thanks for joining. I didn't realize backups were this exciting, but they are. Look at this. We had some cool topics earlier today and tomorrow. No, it's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, Rob Saunders with Dell, kind of a solution architect. I'm now kind of working as a technical staff internal to Dell, building kind of next-gen solutions. Got a lot of that up and coming, but I'm still using Microsoft. I grew up with Microsoft. I do a ton of Linux, ton of Kubernetes right now, more than I care to even talk about, which is why I had to run to the bathroom because I was writing for the last 2 hours. But anyway, so it's a ton of fun, the space I'm in. Especially working with Microsoft, because it really is, for me, it's kind of like working for a little startup inside a massive company. I enjoy the heck out of it. So Steve, oh, and by the way, this is also my hobby, raising and showing Pembroke Welsh Corgis. I did actually go here, which was a couple hours to the west of here, because I was looking for Corgis. I didn't find any, but that's what I do in my spare time. Anyway, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, so howdy everybody. Okay, I'm a Texan. When I say howdy, I got to get it back. Howdy. There we go. Everybody's still awake. You got the coffee. You're ready for a party in here in a little bit, right? Who brought their kit? Who brought their outfit for this, right? Dress up, whatever, Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, absolutely. So I got to go back out to my car and get that stuff. So I've been with Dell for about 24 years now. I've been on the Microsoft Alliance for a good decade, and everything around technology strategy around data, and so this is near and dear to my heart, and we'll go down the rabbit hole for the short period of time that we have here. I'm going to be walking around the room, so if anybody has any questions, I'll have the little almost gelatinous cube. It's a little bit more solidified than gelatinous, but anyway, I'll be walking around with that. Oh, come on, D&D guys, got to use it. So I'll be walking around the room. Do we want to get kick-started here?
Yeah, let's do it. And by the way, we have one more session tomorrow. There's a really cool demo I'm doing tomorrow. I'm trying to plug it because I want to fill the room tomorrow at like 4, using some of the same environments that I was doing the snapshot technology in. But first off, this layer cake, right? There's a lot of layers there. Virtualization, sometimes optional, software-defined everything going forward. And then an OS. I mean, quite literally, we used to have tin and an OS and an app. Now we have a lot of things in the middle. So there's a lot of layers to think about, so automation is key. And we can go into this for days, orbit around this, and I'll probably never get out of my own way. But why snapshots for backup and recovery or repurposing? Right? Use cases over here. Test dev, troubleshooting, forgot the where clause and with the update statement. That's a common theme. I've done that too. We all have in here, I'm sure. But traditional backup, right, consumes a lot of things on your SQL Server. You're probably doing it on maybe a Saturday night, a full, and the diffs maybe nightly. Depends on your environment. Depends on your RTO, right? Recovery time objective. So, but some cons. We needed VDI before 2022. Who in this room has already used 2022 snapshot backups and restored them and started playing with it? Rolled logs forward. Anyone? No? Who's using snapshots right now in general? Okay. So this is different. This is new. This is cool with 2022. Maybe it might, from a Dell perspective, we're all in on it because this is on-premises. This is big for us. I know if you're running in SQL, you have running in Azure, you have some different options. But a use case here, the VSS and the VDI support was limited until now. So some of the metadata, because we're actually, I've got some flow charts here in a second of how this actually works from a metadata perspective. It's really, really cool. Now, you do have to orchestrate with your SAN or your storage cluster, or whatever it is. That could be simply PowerShell. It's what I do all the time. So the newness for SQL Server 2022, what does it do? Well, freezes all the writes, and you guys know this if you're running a lot of snapshots, freezes the writes, reads are still allowed. This snap-on hardware is that server-side CLI or PowerShell or a combination of both. This whole stack in the middle there can be automated very easily. In fact, we do it all the time at Dell. This unfreeze here does happen auto-magically with the T-SQL code if it's successful. If it's not successful, it rolls back. So that's pretty awesome. This is something we never really had before. Now, here's kind of a flow chart, right? The user script. Freeze thaw successful, right? Generate the snap. And this is really it right here. This is the key difference, is metadata only. I'm sorry, question? Oh, question over there. It's a question behind that curtain. So, and then what happens on the SQL Server, right? Acquire the locks, unfreeze, and then reports success back to the client. But the key takeaway here is this metadata. And you can actually drill into this BKM file, which is different than a BAK. You can actually name it whatever you want with an extension. But you can read this file and see what's inside that metadata, just like you can with the restore header or something like that. You guys all understand that. So the script right now, and mounting that snapshot first, and then are the files in the desired location? T-logs, are you going to roll some of those forward? We didn't have this before, but now we can roll T-logs forward to a point in time with a snapshot. Couldn't do that before. That's pretty awesome. And then you can obviously repoint or a move or a with move when you want to restore to a certain location. That's excellent. So any questions on this so far? Any questions about how this runs differently from the guys already running snapshots? Because you're probably very used to this, right? Just a little different nuances right now, the metadata only. I highly recommend trying this. Yep, okay, yeah, please do it. Do you have Dell kit in the house? Okay, okay, okay. And then this BKM file, which is what I was talking about, there's some of what you can read inside the metadata inside the BKM file. It's not unlike what you would see from restore header, same thing. Or restore files only with metadata only. So that's a lot of information about your snaps. Now you can, when I was doing this on, I think I was doing this on the PowerStore environment, Dell has a lot of powers, a lot of power star.star products. So I kind of just nomad around with my virtual toolkit and run stuff and break stuff, or be successful with stuff. So I was doing this on a PowerStore environment. It does start stacking up all the snapshots. There's some cleanup that can be involved. Your storage admin might get a little grouchy if you're keeping a month's worth of snapshots, but I was keeping probably 7-10 days, and there was no problem. And then restoring that, same thing. You can restore to a different name too. Obviously, you've got to do some with move so you don't stomp on what you had. One of the demos I'll probably do tomorrow is I literally mount another volume to the same OS, and then I keep the same names of the data files. That works too. That's definitely an option. Repurposing, again, the old standby if a table's been updated in a really, really bad way. I mean, that's always a great use case. So data virtualization and object storage, this is kind of interesting in the backup realm also. So with SQL Server 2022, we have the ability to connect to S3, to object storage. It's not Amazon. Amazon wrote the API, yes, but it's an open API connecting to S3 object storage. Now, what can we do with that? If you were here yesterday, I'm sure everybody was, and my demo I did with 200 million rows sitting in S3 compatible storage, and it was in a Parquet file, also CSVs, sitting on Dell ECS, which is our object store, one of our object store platforms. And what did I do in the demo? Well, I joined relational data to data in Parquet files, 200 million rows of Parquet file data, and I returned results in about 15, 20 seconds against a Venture works in 200 million rows. That's pretty powerful. So what do I do with that? A few things around backup now. Everybody here probably has big, hairy, tall, wide back tables maybe in your database that never get updated again. They just hang around, and they drag down cache, and they drag down backups. Somebody queries them, and then we're like, oh, man, why do we still have this table hanging around? Why don't we move it out to S3 and leave it out there? Yeah, we have to change some procedure code to query an external location for that data. But if you export your big tables that are only read-only out of the RDBMS, put them in S3, change your queries to look to the external location, because SQL Server then knows only about the metadata of that location. It no longer stores it in the RDBMS, it stores it out in object. That's a pretty cool use case. Now, what does that do for backups? Well, it makes them smaller. Less to back up every night from an RDBMS perspective. That's pretty cool, pretty powerful. Any questions on this?
Wonder how many people are actually using this type of technology in their architecture. It might not be the SQL team, but some of your big data groups.
Yes.
There's some definite cost savings here versus traditional high-end hardware.
You know, on that point, I was working with a client in the States on the East Coast, big university, who had SAS users. Some of you may be familiar with SAS folks. I'll say it nicely. There's another acronym there. I'm not going to use it. But SAS people want their data in their own format, their own way. A lot of times they store it in object. Now, why don't they just carve it off? Oh, they're carving it off, but the T-SQL guys wanted that same data. So they're keeping duplicative stores of data. That gets pretty expensive. The same data, the same attributes, all over the place. Now, they actually were an early adopter with us in SQL Server 2022, and they store everything in S3 in Dell ECS, and the SAS guys and the T-SQL guys query one data set. One data set, instead of storing duplicative data all over the place. Because that just has cascading effects, again, of more backups, more stuff to restore, more stuff to maintain, more stuff to think about. That's a really cool use case. And yes, backup and restore. You can also simply write to a URL with the syntax, just like you would backup database, to URL, or quotes S3, and then the access key. Pretty easy to do. For some continued learning, here's a lot of stuff that myself and others have authored or co-authored. A lot of really good stuff around SQL Server 2022. If you haven't used it, if you haven't used Azure Arc, if you haven't used snapshot backups, or a lot of the other functionality inside of 2022. We've got some more object storage, a paper design guide here. This is really cool what we're doing at Dell. We're actually making it real for everybody. Writing about solutions that matter, talking with clients and writing about solutions that matter. So all of these, InfoHub, if you don't remember anything else, infohub.delltechnologies.com. You can search there really easily. That's where we have a pile of artifacts. And we actually keep them up to date, and we keep hygiene on this too. That's a big deal for us. So I think I made it inside the time. Any questions, Steve, from the audience? People?
Yeah, so I got a query here for the room. So most of you are very likely tied to Windows Server. How many of you are using Linux or some type of open source technology? How many are you seeing the wave that's about to hit you in the face on that with containerization? Because it's coming. It's coming fast. So one of the cool things and big takeaways around the SQL conversation, specifically around SQL 2022, is that Microsoft pumped a whole bunch of steroids into the T-SQL scripts. So before that, and Rob referenced this, in 2019, we had to use some VDI drivers to do SQL on Linux backup. It was painful. But the reality now is I can use T-SQL to drive all of this. So tools commonly used today can be used for not just traditional quiescing SQL on Windows, but also specifically for Linux, which leads to containerization, which leads to the whole hybrid cloud. How many of you have executives that say you're on a cloud-first initiative? It's at least half this room, right? Every CEO has gotten the giddy up to say that they're on. Do they know what that means? Absolutely not. Nope. But they're all saying it, right? And so the reality is that they're all trying to do everything as a service. That's coming. And so one of the things at Dell that we've seen, and we've done a huge amount of validation on the back end, is taking SQL, running it in a container, realizing that that's an operating system discussion like the first slide, the holistic slide you talked about, and taking you forward around that path. Because I remember 20 years ago when I first started learning around virtualization with VMware, what a big deal it was. The whole thing around containerization is just as big of a sea change. And that's going to require some rethinking for the audience here. It's not just going to be a Windows environment. And so Microsoft, anticipating that, has done this work so that you can take those architectures and have confidence about being able to run a backup. Because that was one of the big things we ran into, like with SQL 2019 Big Data Cluster. One of the concerns was, yeah, I'm running in a containerized environment, but I don't have a high degree of confidence that I'm going to be able to restore. Not just backup, but restore, right? Now with SQL 2022, the capabilities around T-SQL is I can use that to do my quiescing even on open source technologies, not just from a Windows Server environment. So that's the wave.
You know, and it's worth noting, Steve, thank you for that. With SQL on Linux, or in a container, or Arc-enabled data services, it's the same SQL Server. So we get the same S3 technology that we're talking about previously with the backups and the options there too. Same SQL Server. And same tools, SSMS, Azure Data Studio, I hope you're using it. If not, that's fine. There's a slide that I had earlier today. I literally deployed 20 SQL MIs in 10 minutes, just all automated. Just I don't know anybody in this room that can deploy 20 SQL servers in about 10 minutes. If you're doing it virtually, it's probably not possible. You can container, yes. That's why it's way cool, especially for dev test or ramp up, wrap down, seasonal type work for maybe expandable read, right? We can have business critical read replicas. That's all pretty cool. And we're going to do some more demos tomorrow afternoon here at 4?
4 o'clock.
So if you're still around, I've got some really cool demos for tomorrow too. I'd love to show everybody. And I'm happy to get on a call or get on a Zoom anytime. I work with people all over the world having fun with these modern technologies. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, the white paper we did for Build last year was around that managed instance business continuity, which is the equivalent to SQL Enterprise Edition, right? Always on, all the bells and whistles. We had that deployed in about 3 minutes.
Yep, 3 replica.
Yeah, primary, secondary. Boom. So again, that's where the hockey puck's going, to abuse that analogy. So be mindful of that. That's where a lot of the hooks are coming that's going to pull you along.
Yep. Any questions? Any topics? Please.
Is it better to have the use the high availability features in SQL Server or at hardware level?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Because Microsoft.
Can you repeat the question? Just
yeah. So the question was kind of. Right. So where should you put your high availability, your DR? Should it be at the app level, SQL, or down at the hardware level with Dell, or maybe both?
Yes.
You can do. There is a way to do both.
the answer is yes.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Part of that answer, too, is practicing your routines for your failover. How fast can you get it back? How many people or skill sets do you want to use to get it back? Microsoft tries to push the HA and the DR up the stack. That's why they have always-on groups, right? That's a great reason for it, but maybe down at the hardware level, especially with Dell, we're doing a lot of really cool solutioning, which is why I moved to another team to do just that, to do some storage type replication.
And it depends on who's doing the replica, right? So the storage admins can have a different mindset than the DBA. They're both going to be right, and there's ways to do duplication there. Rob, I think we're out of time. If we could go to the last slide.
That's a good question.
It's a great question, yeah. So, I mean, there's like 4 different layers of the layer cake where that can be addressed. Hey, we'd love your feedback. If you could scan the QR code different than what we had up front. This is specific for SQL Bits. Let us know if we're on the right track. We think we are. Definitely very deeply invested in thought leadership around all the things around the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform. Rob, closing statement?
If you're still around here tomorrow at 4, please come by. Got some really cool stuff to show everybody.
Go way down the rabbit hole.
Yes, I like to go down the rabbit hole. I usually just tie an orange flag to my head and just go on in.
All right. See everybody at the reception here in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.